Thank you for joining our event today. I'm Kim Spikes, co-chair of the Green Committee. Our mission is basically to spotlight the environmental changes due to human activities. We want to bring awareness to those paving the way for a sustainable future and give you suggestions on how you can change your life to help the planet. And so now I'm going to kick it off to Craig Pinner, my co-chair.
Hi, everybody. I'm Craig. I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. And we have a great speaker for you tonight. Her name is Renee Crowley. She's the Deputy Director of the Lower East Side Ecology Center. And I'm going to just give you a quick little blurb about Renee. Renee has been committed to reducing waste and building strong communities and soils through composting and environmental education for over a decade. Her work is focused on building strong community-based programs with a commitment to empowering New Yorkers to live out the values and sustainability. She holds an MS in City and Regional Planning from the Pratt Institute and a BA in Environmental and Urban Studies from Hamline University. Thank you, Renee, so much for being here with us. We really appreciate it. I think the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to play the trailer for those who haven't seen the film. I know Kim has it teed up, so here we go.
There's so much bad news about our planet, it's overwhelming. The truth is, I've given up. This is the story of a simple solution, a way to heal our planet. The solution is right under our feet, and it's as old as dirt.
All of our soils that are under chemical conventional agriculture are almost completely devoid of microorganisms.
Modern agriculture was not designed for the betterment of the soil.
Fossil fuels are by no means the only thing that is causing climate change. When we damage soils, carbon goes back to the atmosphere.
But when we destroy soil, it releases carbon dioxide.
Biosequestration is using plants, trees, and techniques of grazing and farming to capture carbon and store it in the soil.
We can fix a lot of our climate issues if we bring the CO2 down into a living plant and put it back into the soil where it belongs.
Plants working with soil microorganisms, it seems too simple.
Healthy soils lead to a healthy plant, healthy human, healthy climate.
There could be a way to eat food that heals the planet.
The problem isn't the animal. The problem is where the animals are at.
How do we take waste and repurpose and reuse it, because it's really not waste?
The poop has to stay in the loop.
Compost is just one of a suite of soil-based carbon capture solutions.
We know how to do it. And if we continue to scale over 30 years, we can reverse global warming.
We can get the Earth back to the Garden of Eden that it once was by regeneration.
To see biodiversity return to a place that was completely devastated.
That gives me hope.
Our health and the health of our planet are connected.
If you look over here, my neighbor's land that has been chemical fallowed, then you look over at our paddocks, you have a diversity of different plant species. Which model do you want your food to be produced from? The answer is pretty simple to me.
I'll make you a deal. I won't give up, and neither should you.
Fantastic. As film professionals, we all know how important a good trailer is, and I think that gives a great synopsis for such a wonderful film. Renee, I'm curious, what is the importance of this film?
So I think the film is just really important to showcase that beyond just some more like typical environmental sustainability themes of like solar energy, wind energy, and I don't know, preventing straws from being in our waste stream, like carbon sequestration and utilizing soils is like such a huge and impactful like strategy to battling climate change. And I think what is so exciting about what's portrayed in the movie is just how everything is interconnected and how even us living in New York City, we're like deeply connected to our natural environment and contributing to the ways that like we buy food and what kind of agricultural systems we're supporting by the food that we buy in the city, and like how that all ends up like connecting into how we're contributing to climate change or how we can play a role in preventing climate change. And one thing that really kind of struck me in this film that connects a lot to the work that I do is like thinking about your role in living a more sustainable life. And I think sometimes if you want to like buy an electric car, it can be really expensive, or retrofitting your home to have solar panels. Maybe you don't own your home. It's like, there's a lot of barriers to entry there. But as an individual, like you can play a role in helping build healthy soil in your community and in places in your like local region by like composting your food scraps, or by shopping at your farmer's market and like buying regenerative agricultural food products. And I think that like this tactic towards playing an active role in preventing climate change is really like tangible to just like regular people like us.
Yeah, it's pretty, thank you so much. It's pretty amazing, right? And I feel like, at least me personally, I didn't know anything about this stuff until I got to watch this film. So it was pretty amazing to have a little bit more understanding about that now. I think we're gonna tee up the first clip. Kim, if you're ready.
Throw out more and more of them. It kept going up and up and up. It takes more nitrogen now to raise a bushel of grain than it did in 1960.
Our chemical fertilizers mask the problem of degraded soils. Modern agriculture was not designed for the betterment of the soil.
Today, our most common crops are genetically altered to resist the spraying of toxic pesticides. For example, the #1 crop in the United States, field corn, is almost entirely sprayed with glyphosate, a chemical suspected to cause cancer that's so oversprayed, it's found its way into our drinking water.
These chemicals, which were considered dangerous to begin with, are now being used at rates that would have been inconceivable 20 years ago.
Every year, for every American alive, 3 pounds of toxic chemicals are sprayed onto the food grown on our farms.
That goes into the soil, it goes into the water, it goes into our bodies. It's not just on the food you eat, it's everywhere.
Wow. It's jarring. I mean, just watching that that clip of the planes spraying all over the crops, it just seems so unnatural. Well, this is the current state of affairs, right? But you know, I think that we're curious about what some of the possibilities are for the future. Is there anything that you think that people can be looking forward to in the future? I mean, there's the large corporations that are taking control and doing what we saw in the film, but what do we have on the other side of the spectrum? Renee, do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I was gonna give folks a chance if they wanted to chime in. But yeah, like the future, I think there's opportunities. One thing I've been thinking about is like in the urban setting, like how we could utilize like community garden spaces or like the pockets of parks across the city as like examples of what healthy soil can look like and how it can act. And one thing that's like tied to climate and like soils is also stormwater management. And as New York City is a city of islands and a waterfront community, if you have really healthy soil, it's able to absorb water and hold on to that water and prevent it from like flooding communities. And so I think New York is also an interesting example of like looking forward to the future of why we should care about building healthy soils. So not only as like a way to sequester carbon, but always as a way to act as green infrastructure to protect our city from being flooded by future rising sea levels.
Renee, I have a question. I'm from Texas, so when I go to West Texas, it's always dusty, which they talk a lot about in the film, and why that's the case. Now I know. I just thought that's always been natural. And it's just, everything's yellow, everything's dead. Is the pesticide issue as big in New York? Is that just every single state's using tons of pesticides, or is that kind of pocketed to certain areas?
I mean, I think the larger, I don't know for sure, but I think like the larger, more like big agriculture communities, like in the Midwest, I think in Texas and in California, where it's these like gigantic farm corporations that are growing like corn and soy and other such products. And I remembered this clip in the film where I think it was when they were at the UN, or they were showing like the weather patterns of like where carbon was being released, and you could kind of see it in those like large agricultural pockets. So yeah.
And folks, feel free if you have any insight or any questions or anything, you can put them in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand or just interject as we go along. This is an open discussion for everybody.
Can I just ask Renee for like glyphosate? Like, is there anything like level that is some kind of movement or something to kind of make it less present? Like, is there anything like we as citizens can do to prevent further use, or is it just like a lost game because of, you know, like big money and, you know?
Yeah. I don't know how to answer your question. So part of it, I mean, one, it's like modern agriculture and large scale agriculture has gotten dependent on the use of these chemicals. And it's like deeply political because it's like supporting these chemical companies. And I don't know for sure, but I wonder who's like paying politicians in some way to like keep the like agricultural subsidies that are in place to keep those active, to kind of get farmers to like continue to be reliant on these chemicals. So it's like, I mean, if you want to take that on and change like the political climate around like conventional agriculture, go for it. But I mean, there's like the small ways that you can like influence the market by like buying locally, buying organically, and yeah, like voting with your money in a sense. And then there's like the advocacy route where like groups come out and say like this chemical is really bad for XYZ reasons, like we need to ban this. I forget what chemicals there were, but has anyone read the book Silent Spring, or have you heard of Rachel Carson? Yeah, raise your hands or no?
I have to check that out.
Yeah, it's Rachel Carson was really incredible and was kind of like this pioneer in like toxicology. And I'm forgetting the name of the chemical that like she kind of revealed the levels of toxicity and got it to be like removed from our stream. And so there's like that route too of like maybe you don't have to become the scientist, but you could like start advocacy with some local concerned neighbors around pesticide use. Because even, I mean, this is a little unrelated, but even in New York City, the Parks Department sprays our parks with like mosquito repellents and some pesticides to prevent weeds. And in the park that I work in East River Park, we're not too thrilled about that, and a lot of the neighbors aren't too thrilled about that, and so they like talk to the park department and ask them like, please don't spray these chemicals, especially like when like children are going to be playing in the park like the next day. So there's some like local, like reach out to your elected officials if you're concerned about that stuff too.
Great. I think we're ready for clip number 2.
If you don't have a living plant, you're going to have more evaporation. What we want is transpiration, when the moisture leaves through the plant. When it does that, it increases humidity, and when it increases the humidity, we have more rain. 60% of our rainfall comes from the ocean. But a lot of people don't realize 40% comes from small water cycles where our rain comes from inland. What's going on is we disrupted the small water cycles. That's when you have too much sensible heat coming off of bare soil. You're having these huge vortexes of hot air going out. Instead of attracting the rain, it's pushing the rain clouds away.
Take 1 square meter of soil and make it bare, and I promise you, you will find it much colder at dawn and much hotter at midday than that same piece of ground if it's just covered with plant litter. You have changed the microclimate. Now,
I think my favorite thing about these nature documentaries is the visualizations, because they really sell the story, you know. I'm curious if even possible in an urban environment in New York, or maybe, you know, in some of the other boroughs, not Manhattan, are we able to change the microclimate? What is the microclimate in New York City?
I mean, in the city, we actually face urban heat island effect. Is that a term folks are familiar with? Have you heard that before? So in the city, I mean, I didn't make this connection before, but seeing this now with the image of like the plants and the other side with like the desert and how like temperatures fluctuate. If you think of like New York more like the desert, where there's not a lot of plants, there are tons of asphalt and concrete and lots of dense buildings that are like emitting lots of energy from like air conditioning units and like HVAC systems. And so the temperatures in New York City are like much higher than if you like get out of the city, as you probably experienced if you like want to go up to a cabin in the middle of the summer to get out of the disgusting heat and swampiness of New York. But this is actually like a pretty big like environmental justice issue too, because a lot of the communities that face like the most dramatic like urban heat island impacts are in like low income and communities of color. So when we think about the impacts of our urban environment, it disproportionately impacts those that are like people of color and low income. So when thinking about how can the city kind of level things out, green infrastructure such as like building green roofs are a great alternative, because you're doing kind of like the film showcased, like when you have plants, they're able to like regulate, and when you have the moisture, it like does weather magic and like makes things more cool. So like if we can create more of these like green pockets by utilizing our roofs across New York City, it could help decrease the urban heat island effect that we experience here.
I think it would make the city a lot prettier as well.
Yeah, that too.
I'm
Yeah.
seeing a couple of questions in the chat here. I just wanted to grab onto these before we move on. From Shayna Mangum. Two-part question here. Due to the demand for organic produce, meats, insert agricultural product, is it true that there has been a slight shift in larger farms switching to organic crops? And the second part of the question is, how easy is it to get a USDA organic certified stamp nowadays?
Yeah. So I guess you do, I'm not an expert on like organic food markets, but I mean, you see like even Walmart grocery stores are like carrying organic produce, and like I feel like I heard that Walmart even like is buying up organic farms to like turn them into more profitable or efficient systems, which maybe I think is a little problematic. Like small farm, small scale is like the vibe that I usually try and support. And just to like talk about organic, like if there's a lot of like books and podcasts out there that talk about this, and there's this discussion of like a real organic, or as this movie talks about, like regenerative agriculture as like a better model than just a stamp of USDA organic. Like the USDA organic is like a super watered down version of what organic was actually intended to like create and support. I think as this film really like points to, like what agriculture really is growing microbes, it's building soil, it's growing soil, and like the food that you get to like then sell is like supports you to then continue being a steward of building healthy soil. And the organic certification as it currently is like isn't focused on building soil. So I think that's just the one key like criticism of the like current organic certification. But this movement to talk about like real organic and like regenerative agriculture has like the focal point of farming is building soil instead of just like focusing on what's the biggest eggplant that you can grow and massive amounts of eggplants or whatever you're growing.
Yeah.
That's my little comment on that.
Renee, is there a way to know when you're like at the farmer's market if that is real organic or fake? I mean, I know that you have labeling that's just the kind of the more lenient, I guess, organic, but I'm curious if there's a way to really identify and be like, oh, okay, if I ask this question and they say this, I'm good. Or
I'd say just recommend that you like talk to your farmers and ask them about their practices. And I think I would feel pretty comfortable like going to the Union Square Green Market, and the folks that you're buying from there are probably great. And then what's more concerning is when you go to like a large scale grocery store and see organic from Argentina, you're like, it's organic from Argentina, but it used a heck of a lot of fossil fuels to get to me in New York City. So, I mean, that's the other element too, is like, if I see a conventional package of blueberries from New York or Vermont, and then an organic blueberries like from Mexico, I'll definitely go for the conventional blueberries from my local region rather than getting something that's labeled organic from a very far away country, because it's like
balance.
Yeah. Know your farmer, know your food, right? I'm going to take this one more question from the chat before we move on to the next clip. This one's from Hussein. Hi, Hussein. Do you think the food scrap drop-off program is one way to help in New York City? I know there is not a lot due to budget cuts, but is that a good way to help for those who can't shop green markets?
Yeah, like that's a great way to have an impact in your local community with like by composting your food scraps, you're keeping them out of landfill. When food scraps actually end up in a landfill, they generate methane, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And this is what this is what this film is about, and this is what I like tell people that's so cool is like you can either put your food scraps in a landfill where they generate methane, or you could compost them where it creates finished compost that can be used to build soils that actually sequesters excess carbon from the atmosphere and reverses climate change. So it's like, what do you want to do? Pump more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, or have a practice of composting your food scraps at a food scrap drop-off site to reverse the impacts of climate change. And you're right, there's, I don't want to get into it right now, but if we have time at the end, I'm happy to talk more just about like the status of composting in New York City right now and the budget cuts and what's to come for this next year too.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, I think we'll move on to the next clip.
France maintains the largest agricultural science institution in Europe. It's called INRA, and it's been studying soil for over 100 years. INRA recently developed a program called the 4 for 1,000 Initiative. Their goal is to increase the carbon content of the world's soils by 0.4% annually. That would sequester the same amount of carbon that humanity emits each year.
The soil environment can hold more carbon than the atmosphere and plants living on the surface of the soil combined. We have an incredible ability to be able to store that carbon in the soil in a relatively short period of time.
Great, thanks, Kim. Renee, this is a clip that you had picked out. So I'm just curious, you know, this is kind of on a global scale. I mean, and amazing, right? How that this could be a solution. What's going on in New York? I mean, is there anything similar or maybe in the future?
Yeah, I think what's going on in New York, and I do have to give a shout out to our local New York City Department of Sanitation for being a really pioneering and creative sanitation agency. They've supported community composting programs through like partnerships with nonprofit organizations such as the Lower East Side Ecology Center, where I work at, since the 1994. So they've been supporting community composting like through these nonprofit partnerships for like, what is that, 30 years? Almost 30 years, math, whatever. And like that program has grown over the years to be more focused on education, and in the last maybe like 6-ish years has really focused more on like operating these food scrap drop-off sites. And for those that aren't familiar with what these are, they're basically these like pop-up stations. A lot of them are at farmers markets, where you can bring your food scraps, drop them off with a local community group, and then they bring those food scraps to a site also locally in New York City, where those food scraps are managed and processed and be used to make finished compost, which then that finished compost is used again locally, donated mostly to community gardens, school groups, like Parks Department, kind of all the green spaces in New York use this compost to like build up the health of our local soil. So I think in referencing this clip of like international political leaders coming together to commit to build soil, I think it's really neat that here in New York City, our city programs have been doing this since the early 90s.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I love my compost site. Sometimes I get a little bag of soil back, you know, every now and then when I go there, and I use that to feed my my little fire escape garden that I have going on. I see we have a question in the chat here from Elaine. For an intense effect of, oh, sorry, this is actually a comment. For an intense effect of removing flora, read The Worst Hard Time, anecdotal story of the Great Dust Bowl, land cleared of green growth, drew many immigrants for framing, couldn't grow anything, dust from west swamped New York City, dust travels worldwide. Thank you, Elaine.
Sorry, that was farming, not framing.
Oh,
Yes,
still,
and everyone forgot about it, but on the New York Times bestseller list was this book, and it's done in such a way that they interviewed people. People just died from dust in their lungs, and there were clouds of dust even in New York.
wow.
Dust, soil travels the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really an interest. I never made that connection that like even New York City was impacted by the Dust Bowls, and like how we think of, I don't know, the Midwest as being so far away, but like we're all breathing the same air on this planet Earth. So let's be mindful of that.
I think we can move on to the next clip. I believe this is also about composting.
It is.
And we're making compost. This is the most important kind of garbage that there is, because this is where the nutrients are and this is where the carbon is. Compost arrives, the food scraps from the restaurants and people's homes, and we put them in this sorting system. 60 days ago, this was eggshells and chicken bones and vegetable peelings, and now it's a beautiful finished compost. And I'm digging in, and it's quite warm here. It's still composting very actively. We collect our food scraps, we put them in the green bin, it goes off to Recology's compost facility, we turn it into compost, and it gets on a farm. That's a simple solution.
I don't know about the chicken bones. You're not supposed to put meat in compost.
Well, I would actually say that you can compost anything that's organic matter that was alive or was once living. So this compost site that was just on the clip is Recology in San Francisco, which is the municipal compost program of the city. And for those, did anyone in New York have a brown bin when that program was running? When the city comes and picks up your food scraps?
Yes.
Brown bin. So those municipal scale programs bring their food scraps to industrial scale facilities where they're able to process and manage meats, cheeses, like oily prepared foods. On farms, when a horse dies, a farmer puts their horse in a compost pile and it breaks down over time. And I mean, when you're composting animal products like that, it's like, you don't want to do that in your community garden next to where people are living. Like, it's going to be a little more of a smelly process. You might attract more like pests and like flies and whatnot. But I guess like just compost 101, like, and everything decomposes. Like, we can be composted, and it's just part of the process. But the sites at like farmers markets and the sites that we run, like, we don't accept meats and products like that, because we're composting in East River Park, not too far from where a lot of people live. So we are doing what we can to minimize odors, to minimize pest interactions. And we don't have the technology to like sort stuff out. Like you saw at Recology, like they have these like sorting machines that take out plastics and stuff. Like, that's actually one of the challenges we face at our compost site is we're a much smaller operation and compared to what you just saw on the film. And whenever we get contamination like plastics, we have to hand sort it all out. We have volunteers that remove everything. One of the biggest culprits in our process is fruit stickers. You know, those little stickers on your bananas and avocados. Please take them off before you put those food scraps in your compost bin, because we're just hand picking them out with our hands at the very end of the process. They don't decompose. They're made of plastic. So that is super important.
It's funny to say that, Renee. I was just gonna say real quick that the fruit stickers, I've got like a stack of them at my apartment. And every piece of fruit I take off, I just stick it on top of the next one, and now it's built up over time.
Yeah. We're actually in the process. We want to make these like bingo cards to like hand out to like families. So like when you can like have your kids like, or you as an adult can like play bingo with the fruit stickers too. Yeah. But I see Elaine asked a question about like diseases from animals. And so we're gonna get into a little bit of compost science, but there's this magical temperature when compost piles reach above 131 degrees for like a series of consecutive days. It's called the process to further reduce pathogens. And once a compost pile goes through that process of high temperatures sustained for almost about a week, most of the pathogens get killed off or become like bio-unavailable. Weed seeds also get kind of killed off in this process too. And so if you're managing a compost pile at an industrial scale, those sites have like the right technology in place. They have like thermometers that are like tracking the temperatures of the piles. They've got like, intense systems to make sure that their piles are going through this process of elevated temperatures. And we do that too. Like we monitor the temperature in our piles and also are committed to meeting this like PFRP standard. We also, in industrial scale compost sites, send out their compost for testing on a regular basis to see if there's any pathogens present. And so that's another indicator, like fail-safe process that composters use to make sure that there aren't any pathogens that they're then using to spread onto people's gardens.
What if that comes back positive? What do they do then with the pile?
Yeah, then I think it would probably like go back through the composting process. It probably means that like the right temperatures weren't reached. And so, putting that material back through the composting process. I think of like, welcome to my world, but like compost is magical. It's this like cleansing process where like you take all this stuff we think of as like dirty and waste, and it transforms it into this like regenerative material that like builds healthy ecosystems. Whether you're like intentionally composting or things are just decomposing naturally, like in the forest. And even there are a lot of studies that talk about like heavy metals and lead that like might be in our streams. And when things like that go through the composting process, their like chemical structures get disrupted, and it kind of renders those materials like so that they are, so that they're not like bioavailable to the plants. And so it's like, I mean, don't just like start throwing like all the nasty chemicals into your compost pile, but like there's research being done that looks into like how compost like neutralizes like toxic things.
Yeah, it's amazing. Truly amazing. I was always kind of blown away by that concept. I think we're ready for the next clip.
We're at a critical moment in human history. There could be a way to eat food that heals the planet. The way we're articulating it is the regenerative diet.
I've personally been vegan for 20 years. I'm just going to prove in my own role, like, hey, you can rock life in a very healthy, strong, powerful fashion on a plant-based diet. If you're eating meat, you can eat it from a lot more correct, high-level farms.
If we do eat meat, we need to eat meat that comes from pasture-raised, grass-fed, humanely killed animals.
This is the most crucial choice all of us can make for the future of the planet. What are we eating? What kind of farming systems are we supporting? Are we regenerating the earth or are we degenerating?
I love that they have the CEO of Dr. Bronner's. Such an interesting company. Renee, I know you touched on this a little bit before about eating a regenerative diet, but what does it really mean?
Yeah, I mean, it means like having those conversations with your farmers and knowing kind of what practices folks are following on the farms that are growing your food. I think one of those things that I said earlier is like soil building part of that farm's like regular practice? Because I think like, I mean, the theme throughout the movie is like, yeah, build soil and build healthy soil. And I'm forgetting the farmer that they always go visit in North Dakota. But I love that example of like his story of experiencing like weather trauma after weather trauma, and that forced him to adopt regenerative practices, and like it cleaned up his farm. And when you compare it to his neighbor's farm where like it's covered in dirt, it's just really impactful to see the difference of like what a diverse, healthy agricultural ecosystem can look like. And one other thing I wanted to like touch on in this, if you want to learn more about it, there's a Kiss the Ground book that is really great and talks about a lot of the stuff in the movie, but in some more detail. And one of the points that like really struck me in this book that they didn't quite cover in the movie was they shared this fact that eating a regenerative burger made of like cow meat that was like on a pasture and was a regenerative burger was actually like had less of a carbon impact than like eating a veggie burger that went through like more like of a like consumer process. And that blew my mind, where it's like in like the cow is just like, oh, it's so energy intensive, like meat is like the worst thing you could do for the climate. But it's like, if you know what kind of like ecosystem that cow was part of, it could be like you're actually helping like decrease the amount of carbon in our environment by opting to support the presence of like cattle on our fields. So I don't know if folks have any thoughts on that, or feelings about eating meat if you're a vegetarian, or kind of thoughts on eating veggie meat burger alternatives. Just thought that was really interesting.
Add a little bit to it, because it's a kind of tricky situation to be in. I've been being plant-based for maybe now 8 months. I've been trying to get off meat for at least 3 years, you know, pescatarian, vegetarian, all that path. But it's still like, and I don't want to be like called vegan, because I'm not, it's kind of too ideological for me. But it seems it's a tricky situation. Food is very, very emotional. You start subject about food, it's almost you're picking sides. But there's a lot of like nuances that, you know, anybody has to do in order to understand how this even a changing of diet actually is good or bad. So if you eat a lot of processed food, again, may not be good for the environment for the reasons you just mentioned. So it takes a lot of reading and talking to people, understanding the big impact and the small impacts, and how you fit in all of that, and what the choices they do actually, do they make a difference, and what kind of difference you want to do. That's another thing. Like my thing was ethical, and then the more I learned about eating plant-based stuff, it was more beneficial for me, for my body. So it kind of switched into this new arena I had no idea I'm going to end. But I'm also trying to be observant and thinking like, well, meat is not bad. It's exactly that. How the meat comes to your plate is the story. We have to be more interested in find those details and then make those decisions. But that's a tricky part. It's like a lot of stuff you have to go through. So yeah.
I see we have one question in the chat here from Russell. I'm going to add this question in and try to get onto the last clip so we don't run out of time. Russell asks, is there a trustworthy list published somewhere that rates food brands on their farming or production practices? Renee, I'm not sure if you would know that, but maybe if anybody knows that, we could help Russell out.
I think if you look up this Real Organic Project, I feel like they might have a list of farmers who have like bought on to this idea of real organic / like regenerative agriculture. I feel like I've like seen like partial lists out there, but again, I don't know if there's like a go-to group.
Drop that link for the Real Organic Project in the chat here, so everybody can take a look. And I think we'll move on to the.
So I felt that I had to spend the rest of my life dealing with this. It was hard to imagine at that time that you could restore that. So from about 1994 till 2009, 14 years, an area of 35,000 square kilometers, approximately the size of Belgium. They had the top Chinese scientists, they had international scientists from the World Bank supporting them. They created mapping systems with satellites so that every watershed had a unique address. The results were stunning.
It almost brings a tear to my eyes when I see that. I mean, just how what a vast change between the first clip and the second. I mean, I know that with politics and everything in the United States, it's very difficult. But is it possible for us in the United States? Are people working towards this for the future? I don't know if that's a question you could answer, but I'm just curious if you have any insight into the direction in which things are moving when it comes to soil.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely these like groups, and I mean, even learning about the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Group that the film highlighted, like to have the government actually have like a whole crew dedicated to going out and educating farmers about like adopting better soil management practices on their farms is really great. I think there's a lot of energy around building healthier ecosystems and having people be more aware of like where their food comes from. Like there is energy tied to that. And I like, this clip that you shared is like so inspirational that like, I mean, we think about, we have until like 2050 to like make an impact, which it's like, oh my God, that's like not that lot of time. But like
crazy.
They were able to transform that landscape in 15 years, and like 15 years also feels long, but like if we can commit to doing that important work now, it'll put us and our climate in a much better situation by 2050. But yeah, I'm skeptical of how much energy within the US there is to support this. I think, I mean, with the change of power in the White House, I feel like there's definitely probably some more energy into entertaining this and supporting this. But I'd love to continue to see this expand. And I mean, maybe as like composting gets more popular and compost programs continue to roll out, like I think that's an important way to like get people to think about food and then what happens to my food after I put it away, and just to get people more educated and connecting like purchase what you're buying and putting in your body and like how that impacts your local environment, but also like a very far away environment of like where our food comes from.
Well, we only have a few minutes left here, so I want to just thank everybody for being here today. I really appreciate it. You know, it's just an amazing thing that we're able to even have this conversation. And Renee, thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to give you a second to plug whatever you wanted to for the Lower East Side Ecology Center, if you have anything coming up, or maybe how people can get involved.
So the Lower Side Ecology Center, we are a local nonprofit based in the Lower East Side, but we do programs across Manhattan and across New York City. We're over 30 years old. We started as an organization in 1987, and we do composting. We run food scrap drop-off sites in Manhattan. We do electronics recycling events all across New York City. So if you have an old computer, keep an eye out for an upcoming event, and you can drop off televisions, computers, all of your electronics with us. And then we are the stewards of East River Park, which means that we garden and care for the park. And then we do lots of environmental education. We do lots of workshops. We teach people how to fish, teach people how to connect with their local environment. So I'd say the best thing for you to do is join our newsletter. You can go to our website and it's right at the top. We send out just a monthly newsletter. We are very low spam email interactions. So promise we won't hit you up too much in your inbox. And we have regular volunteer opportunities. So if you want to learn about the composting process, we have volunteer opportunities multiple times a week. So you can sign up to volunteer with us. You can sign up to volunteer to garden and help us care for East River Park. And we also, have a lot of upcoming events. We're doing fishing clinics in June. We are doing tours of our own compost yard. So follow us. We're on Instagram at LES Ecology CTR. Pretty active on there, sharing all of our upcoming events. So if email is not your favorite, we're on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter too.
Great. And I linked the website in the chat here for everybody. And I hope that, maybe the Post New York Alliance will be able to do another event, maybe, some in-person things soon, get out there, get involved, so maybe something in the future. If anybody has any questions for Renee, feel free to put them in the chat. And Kim, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add.
I just want to say thank you so much, Renee. I think this was amazing. And for everyone to be on the lookout for more events on the PNYA website under the Green Committee tab. So we list seedlings, which are just websites and things that we think are interesting to check out. It has all of our upcoming events and all of our past events. And we have discussed briefly with Renee today about maybe doing a tour of their composting site, which I think would be phenomenal. And I'm sure everybody here will want to go. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you all for joining.